Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 22nd of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important updates are coming currently from the United States of America, from the North American continent. And first we're going to talk about the meeting between Joe Biden and the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. Today, Joe Biden promised the Ukrainians that the United States of America is going to send Zelensky and Ukraine another military aid for another $325 million. This is not a very big military aid, but when talking about configuration of this military aid, this is probably the most important military aid on this stage of the special military operation. When talking about this video, of course, the most interesting is Zelensky in this video. Take a look at him. He's very stressed, he's very calm, he's very tired, and probably he think a lot. And at some points of this video, I thought that he even didn't listen to Biden because he was completely in his minds about Ukraine and about the situation in his country. Later, we got more updates from Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States of America. He also confirmed and reported about another military aid for more than $300 million. Zelensky is going to receive new weapon, new missiles, mainly missiles, air defense systems, and missiles to HIMARS. So this is like something like missiles military aid for the Ukrainians. After meeting with the President of the United States of America, Zelensky moved to the north to Canada, and currently he has a meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. I believe that Zelensky also is going to ask Canada to give him more weapons, more missiles, more rockets, and so on. I believe that Canada is not the final point of Ukraine. Obviously, after Canada, Zelensky is going to move to England, to United Kingdom, to France, to Germany. He will try to collect as much as possible from all of them, and after that, he is going to return back to Ukraine with significant number of weapons that he's going to use for the winter and late autumn campaign. When talking about Ukraine, we also got a lot of details, a lot of updates, and the most important probably is that Ukrainians during the previous date made significant number of attacks against Crimea. And as a result of one of those attacks, the Ukrainians managed to damage and probably destroy the Russian, the Black Sea headquarters of their fleet. As a result of that strike, just one soldier was killed, but of course this is probably secret information and we are not going to receive more, even if a lot of people were killed as a result of that strike. The Ukrainians haven't provided us nothing regarding the losses, but anyway, this is a very powerful strike. When talking about this strike, the most important thing that we need to understand is that this operation started a few days ago, and if you remember, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, yesterday the Russians reported about significant number of drones that Ukrainians were using to attack Crimea. And basically during the 20th and 21st of September, the Ukrainians were testing the Russian air defense system in Crimea. Also, the Ukrainians were trying to stress the system, to figure out the most important air defense point and to force the Russians to start the relocation process. And when the Russians launched this relocation process to change positions of air defense systems, the Ukrainians today on the 22nd of September launched another wave of attack using up to 10 Storm Shadow missiles, up to 10 missiles. They were probably Storm Shadow missiles and Scalp missiles, and as a result of those attacks, most of those missiles were shot down. Maybe even every missile was shot down, but just the parts of them fell down on these headquarters of Russian Black Sea Fleet. Anyway, when talking about this situation, of course, we always remember the words of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, who reported that if Ukraine starts attacking the Russian territory with the Storm Shadow missiles, then the Russians will attack immediately, will counterattack immediately, and the Russians will attack the centers of decision-making centers. Now we are moving to the ground and we continue receiving a lot of updates from Kherson direction. Today the Russians published significant number of videos of the usage of FAB1500, and if we can describe today with few words, I would call the 22nd of September is a FAB day. Today, the Russians used significant number of this type of weapon against the Ukrainian forces. The Russians reported that as a result of all those bombings that took place during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost another 80 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. According to the author, for example, of this video, we can see the usage of FAB1500, and the question is the same as we have yesterday, before yesterday, months ago. Why the Russians are so concentrated over this bank of the river, over Dnieper River. One more time, if we increase the numbers of updates, let's say from the beginning, from the 10th of September, we see. Now let's take a look from the beginning of this week. We see how the Russians were concentrated. We see significant number of bombings, of airstrikes, of missile strikes, mainly of course of FAB bombs. And we understand that the only answer to this question is that Ukrainians have concentrated significant number of forces. And another evidence, another report we got from Kherson area, from the Russian sources, and some Russian reported that Wagners were also redeployed in this direction in Kherson area. Not the entire Wagner group, but some battalions or maybe some squads or platoons. But anyway, the Russian military authority took a decision to reinforce and increase the power of this area. And I'll remind you, when talking about quality and configuration of Russian forces, Kherson area is under protection of mainly of mobilized forces of October of 2022. So they're less experienced, of course, in comparison with the forces in Orechov, Zaporizhia. So probably this is the reason why the Russians took a decision to redeploy Wagner to fill this area with more experienced soldiers who can support, probably even train and teach the mobilized forces of October 2022. Now we're moving to Orechov direction, and we also got significant number of updates, and probably the most important updates is that the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with guided bombs and missiles, and not just the area in between Rabotin and Verbova. The Russians today were focused in Gulyai-Polskem, so the settlements that located on the top, on the north of the area of the main clashes. The thing that surprised me today when talking about this area is the Ministry of Defense report. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes that we, for example, saw yesterday, a lot of geolocations destroyed, murder, a Ukrainian offensive operation in trenches, a lot of FPV drone strikes, a lot of guided bomb strikes. As a result of all those things, the Ukrainians lost 20 soldiers. And you know that geolocated videos and the situation that we see on the ground probably is not correlated between each other, and this the only thing that surprised me today. Anyway, the Ukrainian sources reported and the Russians confirmed that during the previous day the Ukrainians made offensive operation from Rabotina to the south of Novoprokopovka using infantry, using storm squad and stormtroopers, and as a result of that attack the Ukrainians managed to enter the northern part of Novoprokopovka. Probably the Russians didn't expect that attack, and for some reason they lost their positions. Later the Russians managed to accumulate their forces in the central part of the settlement and made a counter-offensive operation. And as a result of counter-attack, according to the Russian sources, they managed to force the Ukrainians to step back to Rabotina. Anyway, if this information was confirmed by the Russian sources, so as I understand, currently the northern part of Novoprokopovka is located in the gray zone. Of course, I'm not going to update the map right now. We need more details, more update, but as I understand, this is exactly the situation. The Russians lost control over the northern part of Novoprokopovka, according to some Ukrainian and some Russian sources. But let's wait a little bit before updating the map. When talking about Verbova, we haven't received nothing from this area, just regular bombings, FPV drones attacks against the Ukrainian infantry that try to dig in deeper, as deep as possible along the tree lines in front of the settlement, and also along the along the secondary supply road that goes from Verbova in direction of Rabotina. Now they need to concentrate more forces to collect another critical mass, and only after that the Ukrainians will be able to continue offensive operation in direction of Verbova and of course in direction of Achiritovata, the settlement that located very far to the south from the main area of clashes. Now we are moving to Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We haven't received almost nothing from this area, just Ukrainian sources published the video how they managed to discover the Russian artillery system, the Russian mortar system Pion, and as a result result of HIMARS strike, that system was destroyed. This is probably the only geolocation that we got from the Ukrainian sources, but we got significant number of updates from the Russian side. If you take a look at South Donetsk direction, we see the complete Russian superiority with guided bombs. For example, in the settlement by the name of Bogatyr, the Russians made attack not with guided bombs. Probably the Russians were using Iskander missiles or even Kinzhal. You see significant result of the strike, and that was not the only one. The Russians used 2 or 3 or 4 missiles against this area. They managed to discover the Ukrainian ammo depot or some operational headquarters or something like this, and as a result of significant strikes, they destroyed everything that were located in this direction. You know, I don't remember when the last time I saw something like this. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 110 soldiers. And basically, the Ukrainians were destroyed in a distance with aviation bombs and missiles. Another explosions, another bombings took place in Ugledar. While the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians in South Donetsk, they were counterattacked by the Russian artillery forces and so on. The Ukrainians had significant losses and they were forced to step back for regrouping. Now the Ukrainians tried to regroup and the Russians bomb and attack the Ukrainians with all types of weapons they have, and the most important including FAB1500, FAB1500, caliber missiles and many other types of weapons that the Russians have. Also, the Russians continue preparation of Novomikhailivka and Konstantinovka. On this video we see how the Russians managed to damage Ukraine ammo depot, and after that there was a secondary detonation and very heavy explosion. A little bit to the west in the vicinity of Konstantinovka, the Russians used FAB500. In Paraskovyevka, the Russians also used FAB500. As a result of another strike, another Ukrainian position was destroyed. When talking about the northern settlement, the Russians also were using missile strike in Kurakhova. The Russians reported that as a result of strike, they managed to discover and to destroy the Ukrainian headquarters, and they managed to destroy and probably kill up to 40 soldiers or 40 officers, including the deputy of the general headquarters of this direction. He was killed. So significant superiority in South Donetsk direction. Of course, a lot of explosions, a lot of usage of FAB500, but the most important video probably we got not as a result of FAB bombings in this area, which are also very important. The most important video we got a little bit from to the north, from Novomikhailivka and to the south of Marinka. The Russians launched demining process. You know that anytime any offensive and assault operation has few phases. The first phase is suppression of enemy's artillery. The second phase is to bomb, drone bombings, guided bomb bombings against the shelters, against fire positions, and the next stage after bombings, after destroying and attacking infrastructure, is demining process. And currently the Russians have already launched. On this video we see the Russian T-72 tank who was trying to demine the fields on the north of Novomikhailivka, and obviously he's doing this not because he doesn't know what to do and he doesn't have what to do. Obviously the Russian forces in this area got an order to prepare the bridgehead, to prepare secured support and attack roads for upcoming offensive operation. And we discussed this area many times, and for example, if we increase the numbers of updates one more time from the 1st of August, we see the Russian complete superiority, and that during the previous 2 months the Russians managed almost reduce to ruins the settlements like Konstantinovka, Novomikhailivka, and obviously everything is ready for final phase of the battle for this area and I'm talking about the real assault of these two settlements. And if you remember, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine recently reported us that the Russians are planning to make their own counter-offensive operation. Currently they're going to be up to 3 directions. One of direction is Rabotina. The Russians will try to return the Ukrainian progress, and probably the second direction is not the second according to the value, probably is the most important direction. It is going to be Novomikhailivka, Konstantinovka, Kurakhova and Ugledar. Obviously the number of updates give us this insight. Now we are moving to the Donetsk direction, and also we got significant Russian superiority in aviation bombs. Today we got some updates from Donetsk, New York agglomeration, another usage of FAB1500 and FAB1500 in this area. A lot of explosions, a lot of ammo depots of the Ukrainian forces were destroyed, and the same situation we got from Sivers direction. And to tell the truth, I was very surprised because the Russians haven't been using the like aviation bombs in this direction, and they've just started doing this recently. A lot of explosions, another ammo depot was destroyed, another evidence of complete Russian aviation superiority in this direction. And further, a little bit to the west from Siversk in direction of Kryva Luka, the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian headquarters or some operational like position, and as a result of another strike, that area was destroyed. In this direction, the Russians also were bombing either with aviation bombs or maybe with missile. Anyway, the results on the screen as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians had probably some losses. The number of those losses is unknown. When talking about Bakhmut direction, the Ukrainians stopped completely. No changes on the ground, no attacks. The only thing that we got about geolocations is that Ukrainians started concentration and accumulation their forces on the northern part of Kurdyumovka. The Russians have discovered that, obviously, and during the previous days, the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians in this area heavily using FPV drones. So, as we understand, currently the Ukrainians will try to storm Kurdyumovka. Of course, they're going to need a lot of time for this because there are still a lot of fortifications. First, they need to reduce the settlement till ruins, and after that, they're going to launch assault. And the main purpose is to force the Russians to leave these two settlements, Kurdyumovka, Zaryanovka, and the Ukrainians will be able to establish the combat line and the front line along the railways. Now we are moving to the north in direction of Kupyansk Liman direction, and we also got a lot of updates from this area. The Ukrainian sources and the Russian sources second or third day in a row publish videos of Russian offensive operation in this area. Yesterday we saw the video how the Russians collected an armored fist and tried to penetrate and attack and assault the settlement by the name of Novoyegorovka. Yesterday, according to the video, we understood that the Russians were defeated because of losses, but probably the main purpose of that attack was to penetrate the first defense belt and to capture operational positions. And today the Russians published the video how the Russian light armored vehicles with infantry, with assault troopers were trying to clear the territory and capture, and they managed to capture a number of strongholds. So the battle for Novoyegorovka continues. The Russians advance in this area, and I believe next days we're going to see more attempts from the Russian side. From interesting is that the Russians published the video how they managed to destroy two Leopards in the vicinity of Stelimakhovka using Lancet drone strikes. And these very interesting videos, and you need to understand one thing about Leopards, about the Western weapon when talking about Kupyansk Liman direction. We know and we understand that Ukrainians usually use Western weapon just on the south direction of Zaporizhia and Vremevka tactical bridgehead. And the Ukrainians haven't been using this type of weapon, Western type of weapon, on Kupyansk Liman front line. And the situation is that Ukrainians don't like Western weapon on this area. And the thing is that every Leopard is like targeted, the most valuable and the most targeted target in this area for the Russians. If the Russians from Kupyansk and Liman front line see Ukrainian Western weapon like Leopard, Bradley, these Leopards and Bradleys become the most valuable target for them. And obviously anybody who will in this Leopard is a dead man from the beginning. He doesn't have no chances to survive, because as soon as he appears on the battlefields, everybody will try to destroy this type of weapon. So that's why the soldiers from this area, they don't like this type of weapon. And some authors, some Telegram channels reported many cases that when Ukrainians redeploy some Western weapon in this direction, the officers and the soldiers in this area try to damage this weapon and not to allow the Ukrainians to use them on the battlefield. Because of the same reasons, nobody wants to die first. And if you in Leopard, in Kupyansk, that means that you're going to die first. Obviously, there is no chances to survive. So this is the story about the Western weapon on the Kupyansk direction. Also, the Russians continue bombing and attacking Kislovka-Kotlarovka. We got more details, more updates about that. But one more time, there are no changes on the ground in this direction. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians managed to develop something or take new positions and so on. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of clashes on Kupyansk-Liman front lines, the Ukrainians lost 80 soldiers and 10 armored vehicles, including 2 Leopards. So this is the story about Western weapon on the Kupyansk direction. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.